Good afternoon, and thank you for joining our live talk with STEM Ambassador Jen, who is the Education Manager at the Manta Trust. That is a charity that coordinates global manta and devil ray research and conservation efforts, and you'll hear lots about that in a moment. So this week it's British Science Week starting today, and then that carries on all next week. And this year's theme is change and adapt. And Jen will share how animals adapt to survive and thrive in an ever-changing ocean, and much, much more. So you can feel free to put your questions in the chat, and Jen will answer as many as she can at the end. But let's just have a quick hello and shout out to Kingfisher class. They're at Collingbourne Primary School in Wiltshire. And then we have years 3 and 4 at Kingsley Prep, and we'll do a shout out to some more schools later on. So you don't want to hear any more from me, so let's get started. Good afternoon, Jen.
Good afternoon, Lisa, and good afternoon to all of you joining us in your classrooms or maybe your assembly halls this afternoon. It is my absolute pleasure to come and talk to you this afternoon all about animals which live under the ocean. And I hope you're as excited to find out more about them as I am to share. As Lisa said, it's British Science Week, and our theme is all around how animals change and adapt to their environment. I work for an organisation called the Manta Trust, and at the Manta Trust, we are working to protect a particular type of animal, the manta ray. I'm sure many of you have heard of manta rays before. If you haven't, have a good look at the screen. There's a picture of a beautiful manta ray there swimming under the ocean. A little bit later, we're going to find out more about manta rays and how well they are adapted to the ocean. But first of all, let's just look at the ocean in general. The ocean covers most of our planet. It covers around 71% of our whole planet, nearly 3/4 of our planet. And even though it covers so much of the planet that we live on, we know very, very little about it. In fact, scientists think we maybe have up to about 95% of the ocean that is yet to be explored. And for me as a marine biologist, I mean, that is really exciting. There's nothing more exciting than thinking about all the new things yet to be found and discovered. Here is the beautiful manta ray, and there's plenty of things that we do not yet know or understand about manta rays. A few years ago, I would have told you that there are 2 types or 2 species of manta ray, but our knowledge is always changing, and now we're much more confident that there are 3 species or 3 types of manta ray. Maybe our knowledge will change again in the future. Now, we think in general we found around 240,000 different species, different types of plant and animal that live under the water. But scientists actually think there might be as many as over 2 million. So just think how many plants and animals and species under the water that we have not yet found. It's a really exciting area to work. There's so much diversity of marine life in the water. Here we've got the biggest fish in the ocean. I'm sure many of you are sat there and you recognise what this animal is. It's called a whale shark. Well done if you knew that. The whale shark is the biggest fish in the ocean. It can grow to be about 18 meters long. Now, that is pretty hard to imagine. But, you know, if you're ever walking down the road and you see a bus, particularly one of the big double-decker buses, have a look at how long that is and then double it. Imagine there are 2 buses there, back to back. And that's about as long as a whale shark. They are really, really huge fish. Now, not all sharks are big and scary. The whale shark is big. It's definitely not scary. It doesn't even have proper teeth. The whale shark is very much a gentle giant. There are more than 500 different species of shark living in the ocean, and some of them are incredibly small. Here we have the smallest shark in the world. It's called a dwarf lantern shark. Have a look at the palm of your hand. This fully grown adult shark could fit within the palm of your hand. So they're not always big, they're not always scary. There is such an amazing variety of sharks out there in the world. And it's not just sharks that are all very different from one another. Here we're going to talk about something called crustaceans. Crustaceans is a fancy name for animals which have a hard shell on their backs often. Things like crabs and lobster and shrimp. These are all crustaceans. And there are more than 10,000 different types of these animals living in the world. Here we have on the picture here, the world's largest crab. It's called a Japanese spider crab. And this crab can grow to be about 4 meters across. Now, if I was to put my arms out, and you might want to do this in your classroom, you could also put your arms out. I know, looking at my arm span is about 1.5 meters. Maybe yours is around, maybe about a meter, maybe a little bit more. I'm going to think it's going to be more than 2 of me with my arms out wide to be as big as this crab. For you, maybe even more of you. This crab is absolutely huge. But again, every crab and every crustacean is different. We go from the biggest crustacean to one of the smallest. This animal here is called a copepod. And actually, because I work with manta rays, I know that they're one of the manta rays' favourite things to eat. They love eating copepods. Now, this animal is so little, we've had to zoom in on it here on the picture underneath a microscope. You can really barely see it even just using your eye. If you think about your ruler at school, this copepod is about 1 or 2 millimeters. So one of those tiny lines that you see on your ruler, a really, really little animal living out in the ocean. And then we've got the coral. Here we have some beautiful coral reefs. Now, coral is an animal. Doesn't really look like an animal, does it? People often think it's a rock, or they might think it's a plant, but it is a living animal. And there are so many different kinds of coral out there. Even look at these pictures. How many different kinds can you see in the picture? I can definitely spot at least 5 or 6 different kinds there, maybe more. But actually, over the whole world in the ocean, there are more than 6,000 different species of coral out there. So hopefully you're starting to see how much we do not know about the ocean and the animals that live there, and how different all the animals that live in the ocean are. And the animals that live in the ocean are really, really good at living in lots of different environments. They might live in the deep sea where there's almost no light. They might live in the Arctic where it's really cold. They might live in things like underwater volcanoes or things called hydrothermal vents where the water around it is incredibly hot. And they're really great at being adapted to survive in these areas. Some of these ocean animals are incredibly good at surviving. The animal that we think maybe is one of the best of surviving is this shark that you see on the screen. This is called the Greenland shark. And one of the most amazing things about the Greenland shark is how old they can be. No one knows quite how old a Greenland shark can get, but scientists are guessing that maybe they can live up to around 500 years old. Now that is amazing. When you think back in history, maybe you want to think about in your classes how what kinds of kings and queens, who would have been on the throne at that time. Maybe people would have been alive like William Shakespeare at the same time as some of these Greenland sharks that are still potentially living in the ocean today. They're incredibly long-lived animals. So now that we're finding out a bit more about these animals in the ocean, we're going to come to you and we're going to do a bit of a true or false quiz to see what we know about these animal adaptations, okay? So for every question, I'm going to give you a bit of information on your screen. Our bit of information this time, some fish can walk on land. And you just need to decide, do you think that's true or do you think it's false? And then I'm going to ask you to put your hands up in your classrooms or in your halls to show your teacher what you think, okay? So here's your first piece of information. Some fish can walk on land. Do you think that's true or do you think it's false? If you think it's true, you can raise your hand now. Who is going for true? Some fish can walk on land. Okay, you can pop those hands down. Or what about false? Is anyone saying, nope, absolutely not. There's no way a fish could walk on land. Okay, lovely. Well done on your votes. Let's find out our answer. Now, if you said true, I'm going to give you a round of applause because that is true. Some fish can walk on land. There are a few different types of fish which can walk on land. Here we have one of my favourites. This fish is called a mud skipper, and it uses the fins on the front of its body to help propel itself, to help push itself against the land. Here, someone's taken a video of it in slow motion. You can see they're almost like jumping into the air to help them move across the land. Okay, here's your second question. Sharks can detect heartbeats. True or false? Sharks can detect heartbeats. Okay, if you think that's true, you can go ahead and raise your hand. Okay. What do you think? No, false. Now is your time to vote. Okay, lovely. Well, this time the answer is true. Sharks definitely can detect heartbeats. Sharks are really good at sensing electrical impulses or electrical signals through the water, and that includes a heartbeat. Now, that's a pretty amazing adaptation if you're a shark, but what I think is even more amazing is that some of the animals they might try to eat have found ways to overcome this. They have also adapted. So here we have an animal called a marine iguana, and this beautiful marine iguana lives in the Galapagos Islands. It spends some time on land, but it also goes into the water. This marine iguana has an amazing adaptation to avoid those sharks. When they are in the water, they can slow down their heart rate. Their heart is beating incredibly slowly. It's barely beating at all. And that means that shark cannot find them. And they can keep their heart beating very, very slowly, and maybe around 45 minutes, maybe even an hour. What an amazing adaptation from the iguana. Okay, should we try our third question? Octopuses have 3 hearts and blue blood. Octopuses have 3 hearts and blue blood. Is that true or false? If you think that's true, they do have 3 hearts and they do have blue blood. Now is your time to vote. Okay. Anyone going for false? Who thinks nope, absolutely not? Okay, lovely. Well, this time, if you voted true, this one is also true. If you're an octopus, you would have 3 hearts. And our blood is red, but if you're an octopus, your blood is blue. It has a different pigment, a different chemical into the blood. And that blue blood is really helpful if you're an octopus because it also helps you to survive in really extreme environments. It can help you to survive in areas where it's really incredibly hot and areas where it's really, really cold. So again, a great adaptation for this animal. Okay, we've got maybe 2 more adaptations to look at. Some marine creatures can survive living in frozen waters. Some marine creatures can survive living in frozen waters. True or false? If you want to say true, you can go ahead and raise your hand. Okay, and then anyone voting for false, now is your time. Okay, some marine creatures can survive living in frozen waters. This one is also true. Some marine creatures can survive living even in the coldest environments. Here we have a fish, and this fish has a great name. It's just called an ice fish because it lives in icy water, an ice fish. And the ice fish essentially has pretty much antifreeze in their blood, stopping their blood from freezing up and keeping flowing throughout their body, even in really freezing cold water. Okay, we have one last one, true or false. Some sharks can glow in the dark. Is that true? Are there glow-in-the-dark sharks in the ocean? Hands up for true. Okay, and then hands up for false. Okay, well, you might have noticed a bit of a theme with our answers because they are all true, including this one. Some sharks can glow in the dark. It sounds like something that should just be written in a storybook, but this is true. Some sharks can glow in the dark, and here is our picture to prove it. So if an animal can glow, we call this bioluminescence. Many animals glow, produce light from within their bodies. We've got the sharks, but also maybe you've come across some fish, like the anglerfish. They have this lure, this almost like fishing rod on the top of their head with the light on the end. They produce light at the end of that lure. And this bioluminescence, this ability to glow or produce light, is incredibly helpful. Take our anglerfish. This fish lives down in the deep sea, where the water around it is entirely black. There's no light coming in. you can't see anything down in the deep sea. But what you can see is the light on the top of the anglerfish's lure. And that light is going to attract other animals. It's going to attract small fish that come on over to check out what that light is all about. And as they come on over to check the light, well, what does the anglerfish do? Of course, it pounces and eats that fish for its dinner. So this bioluminescence is great for attracting prey. It might be great for camouflage even. It can help you camouflage in the water, or maybe communicating, sending messages to other animals. Is really, really helpful for animals, particularly that live in the deep sea. Okay, so we're starting to find out just how well many of these animals are adapted to the ocean, to the habitats where they live. I'm just going to give you 20 seconds or so to think about this question in your classroom. What threats do marine animals face? Maybe in that 20 seconds you take 1 or 2 answers from your group. What threats do marine animals face? Have a good think now for 20 seconds. And just 5 seconds to go. You can maybe take your last answer. Okay, starting for us to come back together. I'm sure you had lots of hands up in your classroom and lots of answers. There are lots of threats that marine animals face. Maybe you had some of these. Maybe you might have said fishing, or noise, or plastic pollution, or getting tangled up in things like fishing nets. You could have mentioned climate change, or being predated, being eaten by another animal. There are loads of different threats. Maybe you even thought of some there that aren't on my list. If you're an animal living in the ocean, you can have a pretty tough time. There are lots of threats that you have to try to overcome. But some marine animals are getting really good at overcoming some of the threats that they're facing. I'm just going to show you one example today, but there are many examples out there. Here we have a lovely octopus. And the octopus is in a pretty unnatural looking home, okay? This is an example of pollution. We can see there something that we have thrown out as humans has found its way into the ocean. It looks like an old tin, but it could be a plastic bottle, a glass bottle. It could be all sorts of different things that we might have thrown out that have gotten their way into the environment. Now, most of the time, if we throw out our rubbish and it gets into the environment or into the water, that is a bad thing. You know, animals might get tangled in it, they could eat it, they could hurt themselves on it. But in this case, the octopus has been using this to its advantage. Now, the octopus in there looks like it's having a pretty good time sheltering away. It's found itself a nice new shelter. But sometimes these items could be used as camouflage. They might use it to hide themselves, or it could even be a place for them to lay their eggs. And that is particularly useful because often they would use some of the really big seashells that you might find on the seabed. But many of those seashells are becoming hard to find. You know, we often take them from the water and sell them as souvenirs. So the clever octopus here is finding new ways to utilize our rubbish for its own advantage. So that's a pretty good way to see these animals overcome a challenge. Now, there are loads of really great things out there that we can see about how animals are adapting to the challenge that we kind of create, but they do still need our help. You know, we can't assume that every animal in the ocean is going to find a way to adapt to the challenges that we present. You know, we are changing the environment too quickly for that, much quicker than these animals can adapt. And one animal that needs our help is the beautiful manta ray. Okay. Now, I mentioned at the beginning, I work for an organisation called the Manta Trust, and we are working to protect the manta ray. The manta ray is perfectly adapted to its environment. I'm going to show you a couple of adaptations. Here at the front of its face, in front of the mouth, we have this odd-looking body part. These are called cephalic fins. They're a great adaptation. A lot of the time, they're rolled up and they're at the side of the manta ray's head. But right now, they're unrolled and they're in front of the mouth. And that tells me that this manta ray is looking for food. This is forming a perfect funnel in front of its mouth, helping it to get water full of food into the mouth. Here is our manta ray. Again, look at those cephalic fins. They're out in front of the manta, helping it to feed. And although they're one of the biggest fish in the ocean, they actually feed on the tiniest animals in the ocean. Maybe you've heard of them. They're called plankton. Here we've got a lovely zoomed in picture of plankton underneath a microscope. This is a manta ray's favourite food, and those cephalic fins are helping to get that food into its mouth. You can look at the cephalic fins again. Now they're rolled up. They're beside the manta ray's head. They almost look like horns. And I know now that that manta ray is not feeding anymore. But instead I can see some other adaptations. I can see the pectoral fins, these big fins on the side of its body. We often call them the wings of the manta ray because they act a lot like the wings of a bird. They are flapping up and down in the water, getting lots of speed and lots of kind of drive through the water, helping them to swim really, really well. And another great adaptation, if you're a manta ray, is your tail, or what I might call the shark detector. This tail is great at feeling vibrations, movement coming through the water that might tell the manta ray there's a big shark not very far away that maybe would like to eat me for its dinner. I best swim off. So the manta ray is really, really well adapted. And I'm going to play you around 30 seconds of a video, just so you can see the manta rays under the water and you can watch how they move. Let's look together. I'm just going to pause it there for us so we can talk a little bit about what we're seeing. Hopefully you notice them moving through the water, those big pectoral fins or wings flapping through the water, and maybe you notice the mouths open wide, cephalic fins in front of their head, helping to funnel plankton into the mouth. But what we can see on the screen right now is also really interesting. Did you see the manta rays are swimming together in a big group, in a big underwater circle? And we actually call this cyclone feeding. They're creating a cyclone under the water and of tasty plankton. It's helping them to get loads of plankton into the middle of the group of manta rays so they can all eat lots of plankton in one go. It's a pretty smart thing for them to do. Okay, so we know now that manta rays are really well adapted, but even though they are really well adapted, they do still need our help. Take a look at this picture. Here's all the different kinds of manta and devil ray, which is like a mini manta, that the organisation I work for is helping to protect. And can you see nearly all of them have this big red word underneath their picture? Almost all of them say endangered. We are worried about how many of them will be left in the future. They are in danger. And they're in danger because they face many, many different threats. I'm just going to share two with you today. Okay, the next picture is a little bit gruesome. It's not bad, but it will show you an injured manta ray, just so you know what to expect. Here we have a picture of actually my favourite manta ray. He's called Baba Ganoush. And look at Baba Ganoush. You can see he doesn't quite look right. He's got big injuries, big cuts all up his back. He's lost his tail. And that is because manta rays are often swimming at the top of the water. And what else is at the top of the water? Speedboats. And these speedboats are zooming along the water and they often can't see a manta ray until it's far too late and they're going to run the manta ray over. Now, if you think at the back of a speedboat, they have these big propellers, these blades in the water. Well, that is what has hit poor Baba Ganoush. He has been cut by the blades of the speedboat propeller. It's cut him up his body. And when we saw him after this accident, we thought, you know, poor Baba Ganoush, there's no way he would survive. He's too badly injured. But a few months later, we're back in the water and we saw him. And he had healed his injuries, even injuries this bad. And that is because manta rays have the most amazing ability to kind of regrow their skin and heal their wounds. They're incredibly good at that. So he has managed to survive that speedboat hit, but not all manta rays are so lucky. And one more threat I'm going to show you again, just a slightly sad photo. We've got a manta ray caught up in a fishing net. And this sadly does happen quite often. These fishing nets might be laid out to catch fish for us to eat, but often they do catch other animals in there, things like the manta rays as well. So you're seeing that life as a manta ray can be quite tough. You're busy moving in the water trying to eat your plankton, but you've got to dodge the boat. You've got to dodge the fishing net. It's quite a hard life. And so to show you how hard that is, we're going to play a game together. The game is, can you survive life as a manta ray? And to play the game, we're going to need to learn some actions. Okay, normal manta ray, we have cephalic fins rolled up at the side of our head. Maybe you can all copy me now in your classrooms. Can you roll up your cephalic fins and put them on the side of your head? Okay, but as you move through the water, maybe you see some plankton that you want to eat. Here's our plankton. What happens? My cephalic fins unroll and they're coming around in front of my head. I want to eat the plankton. Maybe I see a lot of plankton. In that case, I'm scooping the plankton up and I'm moving my head back to get all the plankton in my mouth. Oh no, along comes a boat. What happens? I need to dodge the boat. I'm going to dodge from side to side. Maybe you can dodge from side to side where you're sat too. And oh no, here's my other threat. A big boat with a fishing net. I'm dodging again from side to side. Okay, so this is how we play our game. Cephalic fins are rolled up. But if we see the plankton, we're unrolling. If we see lots of plankton, we're scooping it up. And if we see a fishing net or a boat, we're dodging the fishing net or boat. Okay, you ready to play? Cephalic fins rolled up. Off we go. There is plankton. Get your cephalic fins unrolled. And as there are lots, can you scoop it up? Don't forget to dodge the boat. And don't forget to dodge the net. You're still wanting to feed. That's the most important thing for the manta rays. Cephalic fins out. But there's still fishing nets in the water. Keep eating. Don't forget to eat. Can you dodge the boat? And can you keep finding your food? Oh no, look, you're lucky. There's lots of plankton in the water. Scoop it up. Heads go back. Can you dodge the net? Don't get caught up in the fishing net. And keep eating. And if you made it that far, well done. You have survived. Life as a manta ray is quite hard. You need to find lots of plankton. They eat absolutely thousands of bits of plankton every single day. But you also have to dodge those boats and dodge those fishing nets. Now, we're coming towards the end, and I'm hoping that many of you sat there maybe would like to be marine biologists in the future. And you could work with all sorts of marine animals. Here are two animals that we're lucky enough to have on the coastline here in the UK. If you're sat in the UK like I am today, you know, we can find these animals off our coast. On the left, we have a big shark, the basking shark. It's one of the biggest fish in the world. It can look a little bit scary because of the big mouths, but they are just because they are filter feeders, like the manta rays. They're eating the plankton. And we can find them around the UK in the summer. They are big, harmless, gentle giants. And on the right, we have a grey seal. We are really lucky. We have huge numbers of grey seals around the UK, more than any other country in the world. So we have loads of amazing wildlife to find right here on our doorstep. Now I'm going to leave you with one challenge today before we go to some questions. And my challenge for you is for you all to think, what could you do to help protect the ocean and help protect the animals living in it? It can be quite a hard question. Sometimes we think, you know, what can I do? I don't think I can help. But actually, there are things that every single one of us here today can do to help protect these animals. I'm going to give you a few ideas, but maybe you might also think of ideas of your own. I'm going to put a few up. Now, you could think about what you eat. Today, we learned that sometimes fishing can also catch other animals like the manta rays. So maybe you want to sit down with people at home, maybe people like your mums or dads, maybe talk about your friends, and look at what you eat at home. Do you eat lots of fish? If you do, can you find out how your fish is caught? And does it help to keep other animals safe? Think about the things that we throw away. We saw the octopus living in a tin can. Well, our waste doesn't always become so useful for these animals. It might be thinking about how we get rid of the things that we don't need anymore. Do we recycle them? Or it might be thinking, maybe I don't need to buy that in the first place. Actually, I don't need that because I'm probably going to throw it away quite soon. Many people who look after animals work for charities. I work for a charity. And what that means is that we really rely on people to help us raise money for our work. You could always look at raising money for people who work with turtles, manta rays, dolphins, whatever you are interested in. Maybe you can do a sponsored run, a sponsored bait sale. There are loads of ways you can raise money for people working with these animals. And the most important one, I think, something that we can all do today, when you go home this afternoon, I would love you to tell at least one more person something about what you have learned today. Maybe you tell them about the manta rays that you dodged the boat and the fishing net. Maybe you tell them about the octopus. Maybe you tell them about some of those amazing adaptations that we learned about before, like the glow-in-the-dark sharks. So hopefully everyone can go home today and tell someone about one thing that they have learned. But otherwise, I'm going to hand over to you and your questions. I think we've probably got lots of questions coming through the chat that I will try to answer for you.
Yes, we certainly have. And thank you so much for that informative talk, Jen. I'm just going to give a few more shout outs. I did promise I would do it earlier. I can't believe we've got all of Meadowhead Junior School who are in Blackburn. So hello to you all there. We have got Year 2 at Queen Mary Avenue. We have got so many. We've got hundreds of schools. We have Burton Moorwood, Year 6, they're in Cumbria. And we have Year 6, Wellesley Park Primary School. Thank you everyone who joined us today, and let's put these questions to our friend James, who's going to take your wonderful questions and ask Jen what the answers are. Hi, James.
Thank you, Lisa. Jen, so the first question we have got, there's so many school shout outs, so we'll do some more in a bit, is how do we know there are millions more creatures to discover?
That's a great question. So we can try and figure that out by looking at how many we're finding each year. You know, there are certain scientists who might go to areas like the deep sea using technology to do that. And every time they'll be finding new animals. And so by the kind of rate at which we're finding new animals, we can work out that there are probably lots more left in these areas to find. And we know there are lots of areas we haven't ever been to. So we know that there is probably animals in those areas too. So scientists can start to work out how many more they think there are, but it is a bit of an estimate. You know, we don't know for sure how many are out there.
Thank you, Jen. The next question is, why does coral look like plants?
That's a great question. That is just the way it looks. It does look quite unusual, doesn't it? It doesn't look like, you know, we might imagine an animal might look. And that's probably because it's quite an unusual animal. It has a very, very special relationship with another animal, a type of algae. This algae's got a fancy name. It's called zooxanthellae. And this algae lives inside the coral, and they really rely on each other, the coral and the algae. They can't really survive without the other. So the algae live inside the coral, and they are helping to make food for the coral. And without the algae, the coral can't survive. And so if you've ever heard of something called coral bleaching, which might happen because of climate change or water getting warmer, the corals go white. And this is because the algae living inside the coral has become too stressed by the heat and it has left the coral. And so that is almost like the first stage of coral dying. And so, you know, coral is quite an unusual animal, and it's a really amazing animal to research. Maybe you want to have a look at something over the weekend. Have a look at coral. It's a pretty cool animal to find out about.
Thank you, Jen. Beeston Ryan's Junior School has asked, where does the large crab live?
So that is a Japanese spider crab. So you're imagining waters around that kind of area of the world. I've actually never seen one. I've only seen pictures of Japanese spider crabs online. I would love to see one. Aren't they amazing? But yeah, they're very cool. If you, again, look them up online, you'll see pictures of people holding them, and you can see how big they look next to the person. Again, a really amazing, diverse animal.
We've got Fox's class asking, what do whale sharks eat?
What do whale sharks eat? Great question. So whale sharks and manta rays are actually very similar. They're both filter feeders, which means they both love to eat plankton. They filter the plankton out of the water. And actually that basking shark that we looked at a moment ago, I don't know if you can still see my screen on it. If you can, I'm going to go back to the picture. Here's our basking shark with its big mouth open wide. And the basking shark's mouth almost looks the exact same as a manta ray and a whale shark. They're all eating plankton from the water. So even though these animals are huge, you know, they only eat the teeny tiny animals. So you can imagine they have to eat absolutely loads of these animals to survive, thousands and thousands every day.
Thank you, Jen. What adaptations do you think will happen in the future and why?
Oh my gosh, what a great question. Oh, I just do not know. Well, I think, you know, if we think about the ways, well, some of the things that we're seeing. So we talked about climate change and the water getting warmer and that affecting the corals with coral bleaching. Well, scientists are starting to see some evidence of corals being able to adapt to that. So it might be that, you know, we talked about the algae living in the coral, that they're picking the most kind of heat-resistant coral to live in the heat-resistant algae, sorry, to live in the coral, you know, the toughest algae that might be able to survive the heat. So we are seeing some changes relating to that. We're seeing some changes relating to things like fishing. You know, some types of fish, some sharks are adapting to avoid areas where lots of fishing is happening. You know, we're seeing all sorts of different adaptations happening. That would be a really good question for you to think about the weekend too. Imagine some of these threats. How do you think animals might adapt to them in time? It's a great question and only time will tell.
Thank you, Jen. Henson class at Wellesbury Park Primary have asked, what is the most dangerous animal in the sea?
Oh, what's the most dangerous animal in the sea? Oh, there's so many things we could talk about here. I mean, it depends how you want to look at it. It could be that you're looking at a kind of, you know, venomous animal. There are some animals in the sea like the box jellyfish, which are incredibly venomous and dangerous. You could look at, you know, you could even talk about humans going in the sea and fishing. You know, we unfortunately kill an awful lot of ocean animals. You could look at it from a predator point of view, you know, which animals kind of eat the most fish. Oh, there's all sorts of ways we could look at it really. But I always think to myself, you know, although there are some animals that we need to be careful of, you know, these animals are just doing what they need to do to survive. They're not going out there to be dangerous. They're going out there to get their food or to survive in a difficult environment. And they all find different ways of doing that. And some of the ways might be through venom or eating or stinging or electric shock, you know, all these types of things. Yeah, really good question. I'm going to be thinking about that one later.
Thank you, Jen. The next question is, are manta rays similar to stingrays?
Great question. Yeah, they are similar to stingrays in that they are a type of ray. So there are loads of different types of ray in the world. And even if you're sat here in the UK, you know, if we went into the waters around the UK, you wouldn't find manta rays, but you would find other types of ray. We have rays here in the UK. But not all rays are stingrays. So all stingrays are ray, not all rays are stingray. Okay, stingrays will have that stinger on their tail. And they do look quite distinctive. They're usually quite kind of rounded in shape. Whereas if we look at the manta ray, it's a bit more angular in shape. It's bigger. It doesn't have that stinger on its tail. But they are both types of ray.
And Mrs. Skilton Yates class have asked, how many manta rays are there in the oceans?
Oh, good question. And do you remember earlier I said we do not know everything about this animal yet? It's one of the things we just don't know for sure. You know, what we do with our work is we are trying to work out how many there are in different areas of the world. And what we do is we take photographs of their belly, because on their belly they have spots. And just like you will have fingerprints different from one another, if you're a manta ray, your spotty belly looks different from every other manta ray's spotty belly. So we take these photos so we can work out who is who looking at the belly spot. And we put the photo, we give them a name, and we put the photo on our computer. And it means we can start to work out how many manta rays there are in different areas of the world. So there's one country that we work in called the Maldives. And the Maldives is really important for manta rays. It's got a really big amount of reef manta rays, the biggest population in the world. And we know that we have around 6,000 photos of different manta rays from that area. So in that area, maybe at least 6,000. If I went over near the Galapagos Islands to Ecuador, I know there's a really big population there of the biggest type of manta ray, the oceanic manta ray. We call it a superpopulation. There's around about 22,000 living in that area. So we're starting to build up pictures of how many there are in different areas, but it is definitely a picture in progress. It's something that we're always trying to figure out, and that number is always changing as more and more are kind of taken from the ocean.
Thank you, Jen. The next question is Christchurch Primary have asked, how long does manta rays live for?
Great question. And I can give you our best guess, but again, we don't know for sure. No one has really been studying them for long enough to know for sure. Our best guess is that they live to around about 50 to 60 years old. And we're pretty sure that one turned 50 a few years ago. So, it's fitting in with what we think. So best guess at the moment, 50 to 60 years old. But who knows, maybe in the future we'll be proven wrong.
Thank you, Jen. The next question is still manta rays, coming for a minute, is St Mark's Primary asking, do manta rays lay eggs?
Oh, good question. So manta rays give birth to live young, a bit like humans do, but a little bit differently. They will have an egg develop in their body, and the live baby will kind of hatch from the egg in their body and then be born live at a later date. And what's quite amazing about manta rays and birth is that to date, we have not ever yet seen a manta ray give birth in the wild. Kind of everything we know about manta ray birth has come from a manta ray in an aquarium that gave birth. But where they give birth in the wild is a little bit of a mystery, probably down into the deep water, which is maybe why no one's ever observed this yet. And a baby manta ray, when it comes from the mum, is already really big. It's already about 1.5 meters long, wide. So, I'm thinking about my height, that's about how tall I am. So they're already really, really large animals. And they come out of the mum with the kind of wings, the pectoral fins all wrapped around their body like a big burrito or a big taco, just to help them come out of mum. And then the baby is actually really good at looking after itself pretty much immediately. So immediately, almost mum and baby, they don't really stay together. Baby can go off and look after itself. And they tend to go to shallow water, to what we might call a nursery area. And because in those shallow waters, predators like sharks, they can't really come into the shallow water so easily. That baby manta ray can kind of grow in the shallow water, get a bit bigger before it goes out into the open ocean.
Thank you, Jen. We've got year 3 at Cotwall End Primary School in Dudley asking, how long does it take for an injured manta ray to heal?
Good question. So it probably depends on what the injury is and how bad the injury is. Baba Ganoush, we spotted him in the water probably not long after he got hit by that speedboat. And I would say it was around about 6 months later when we spotted him again. And at that point, his wounds looked really well healed. But we've also seen it in shorter time frames. If a manta ray has a shark bite, we've seen that heal up maybe within a few months. So it probably is a little bit dependent on the wound and how deep it is. And we actually don't understand really yet, how they have this amazing ability to heal these wounds. And one day, if we do understand that better, maybe that would be really good for us as humans, could help us to heal our wounds. Maybe we can take that knowledge and use it for our own benefit. Yeah, still a little bit there to find out.
Thank you, Jen. A personal question for you. School's asking, is class 7 asking, how long have you been working in marine life and how did you get into this area of work?
Yeah, good question. So I work at the Manta Trust as the education manager. And so I do a little bit of 2 different roles. Sometimes I join the team on their research and I get to go in the water and I get to help research the manta rays. And sometimes I do like what we're doing today and I spend time with school groups telling them about the manta rays. And so my work background is really mixed between 2 things, between marine biology research and teaching. I've actually done both of those things for quite a long time I've got to work out my age, I don't know, like 16, 17 years or something like that, a mixture of these 2 things. I've been scuba diving for around about the same time. I learned to scuba dive when I was around about 20 or 21. And that's something you can actually do from the age of about 11. You can learn to scuba dive. So a long time. And I've worked with quite a few different animals in that time. So I haven't just worked with manta rays, but I've been working at the Manta Trust now for around about 3 years with manta rays.
Thank you, Jen. And one school has asked, have you ever swum with manta ray?
Yeah, quite a few times. They're wonderful animals to be in the water with. They're very kind of gentle giants. They have the biggest brain of any fish for their body size. And so, we think for a fish, they're really quite smart. and they often will come over to divers and look at what you're doing. You know, they might hang around for a little while if you don't disturb them. They're really, really amazing animals to be in the water with.
Oh, thank you. And the last question, and this is from Hollingwood Primary School in Year 2. Is it hard being a marine biologist?
Oh, it can be hard. I mean, there's lots of amazing moments. You get to be in the water, you get to see all these animals, but there are definitely harder moments too. You know, we might be in the water for like 6, 7, 8 hours a day, which can sound really wonderful, but it gets incredibly tiring, and it can be really, really hard physical work. You could be on the boat during storms. And again, if you're someone that gets seasick, you know, you might not enjoy that so much. You might have to get up really early or work really late. You know, we might do quite strange hours, you know, when the mantas are around, kind of all hands on deck, and you want to spend as much time there as possible and get all your data whilst the mantas are there. So yeah, there can be lots of challenges, but also lots of incredible things to do and see too.
Thank you, Jen. There's been lots of questions, so thank you everyone for your questions, and sorry we couldn't get to every single one. And I'll just quickly pass to Lisa to wrap up.
Thank you, James. Thank you, Jen. And thank you, everyone. As we said, we're sorry we couldn't give shout outs to you all. We would be here all afternoon if we did. So thank you for joining us. And we hope you feel inspired to help protect our ocean and its inhabitants. And as Jen mentioned earlier, if you can go home and tell just one person about something you learnt today, that's really, really great. Thank you very much. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. A special thank you to Jen. And we hope you enjoy the rest of British Science Week. Goodbye, everyone. Have a nice weekend.